sure was a handful to take in yesterday, huh? A handful of information to chew on, if you wish to. Whatever, the good thing is you got the choice to, but holy cow. Holy cow, right? Oh no, here comes goats. But anyway, I think today what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure I get as many voices heard as I can right now, today. And just because, don't think about it, coming up. And maybe possibly do that tomorrow too. I gotta get a break. I gotta take a break from what I'm doing currently. I always make sure that I go and do what I'm passionate about, no matter how busy I am, no matter how many different projects I get stacked up. I make sure that I go and do what I need to do that makes me feel absolutely wicked, which is being in the mountains solo, running up and down a river or whatever. So that's another funny thing, being an outdoors person, which all of you know and can relate to, you anglers and hunters, is so funny. We go to do our usual work our asses off, get absolutely exhausted, and then we'll take our time off, and what do? We'll go get up at 4:30 in the morning and fish all day long, and do it again the next day, and absolutely exhaust ourselves, thinking we're actually taking a rest. Or the same thing with hunting too, right? I'll need a break from work. You're gonna get caught up, and then you'll get up at 4:30 in the morning or whatever, and hike up a mountain in the dark, and hike up and down that mountain in the rain or in the snow or in the whatever, and then you go back to work again after a couple days of that. It's kind of funny. So I'm behind in sleep big time right now, but my idea of a break is getting up at 4:30 in the morning, driving for an hour and a half, and then hiking, and then possibly fishing. Is what it is, right? I know there's a lot of you out there that can relate to that one. The funny things we do thinking it's taking a break, right? It's hard. It's hard to sit and do nothing. It's hard to rest. It's hard to relax sometimes. If I go to another country, then I can relax because it's easy going. Taking in the sights and the scenes and taking pictures and learning and eating out different foods, and that's quite relaxing. Now here comes a horse. She's not going to come in here. But anyway, babbling. Let's get on with it. Let's hear some people's voices instead of mine. Well, it's going to be my voice, but let's hear their words instead of mine. She's thinking about coming in the shop. Anyway, this is titled Something in Yosemite. Hi, I've watched your videos and the stories are very interesting, and I'm growing more interested in this topic, especially with how it relates to government cover-up and with what's been coming out with, Lou Elizondo, an alleged UAP government cover-up. New to me. I watched the recent video about the Forest Service guy who had 3 sightings in the Sierra Nevadas, and it inspired me to share my story. It's not as compelling as his, however, it may add to the spirit of what you're doing and help more people come forward. I don't have any fear of sharing my experiences, but I've never been threatened by the government, so it's easy for me to share. My story only involves feeling terrified by what I heard in Yosemite, a hotspot for missing people, and in the same area as the recent Forest Service story, the base of Bridal Veil Falls. October 2020, my wife and I stayed the night in Yosemite. It was the perfect time to visit. Everyone's still in fear of COVID, and they were limiting the number of guests, so it was practically empty. My wife and I went out at night to get photos of the Milky Way. After a couple hours, I decided to drive around to a spot where I could get shots looking east at El Capitan, and we were parked on the side of the road near Bridal Veil Falls. It was around 10 p.m. I'd been shooting photos since sunset, and no cars at all driving around Yosemite anywhere. It was perfect for getting those long exposure photos. With my wife in the car, I got out and set up my tripod close to car along the road. I only had headlights, so I stayed close, as I couldn't see very far, and there are bear around, although mostly harmless to people there. After a few minutes waiting for a photo to complete, I heard footsteps coming down the road toward me at a pretty fast jogging pace, as if an animal was coming at me. However, it sounded bipedal. My first thought was a bear bluff charging me, and I jumped into the car as my headlight didn't see anything. I didn't know where it was at. My wife was in the car and she had the windows up, so she was wondering what the hell I was doing, hopping in the car, and I said something just came at me. Thinking I was just being paranoid, she laughed it off and I sat there with no animal coming up to the car. I had her flip the car around to try and shine the headlights all around. Since my light didn't shine far, we didn't see anything. It was fairly windy that night, so I convinced myself it was leaves rustling down the road, and I got back out to get a picture I wanted. After about a minute or two, I heard the same steps coming at me, and I hopped back in the car. I told my wife I heard it again. This time my wife had the windows down and she said she heard it too. We decided, screw this, let's head out. We spun the car around again, shined headlights all over the area, and saw nothing. I don't know what I heard, but it sounded bipedal. I've grown up around animals my whole life, raising pigs, horses, and spending time at my in-laws' cattle ranch with deer all around, so I know what four-legged animals running sound like. Sorry for the long story, with no photo or sightings, and it may have not been worth sharing on your channel. It may be a disappointing story to some people, but if you knew my wife and I, we wouldn't make this up. And I definitely got the feeling whatever it was didn't want us there, because I felt fear there. I hadn't felt fear anywhere else in Yosemite. The only thing I can think it could have been is a hiker or climber playing a prank on me, but I'm sure we would have saw a person with their lights shining around. Thank you for your time, and I'm going to stay anonymous. My in-laws' ranch is in the Sierra Nevadas, and my father-in-law has been a logger / Caltrans employee up there his whole life, with no sightings or stories of anything. He once experienced a bright light hovering low above he and his logging crew one night, way out at intersecting logging roads. He doesn't bullshit, so I believe him. He doesn't know what it was, but it was in the middle of nowhere. I'll keep my eyes out as I spend a good amount of time exploring these areas. I'm hoping to hear more stories from this part of California and Yosemite. Thank you, me. Okay, me. Shared. Shared and name withheld. And possibly if somebody else can relate to that or wants to get a hold of that person or add to it, then throw down in the comment section below this video, all right? And let it rip. Unless it's something significant, and you think it's going to help somebody, then email it into me at sharemystory@howtohunt.com, all right? All right, mark this one as read. More voices, more information, and we're hoping for more superheroes to come forward and share what they know. All right? You know who you are, and I know you're watching. Just do it. Go get yourself a secure email like Proton email or something and send it to us, okay? Number two, Jasper County, Texas, Thanksgiving 21. Dear Steve, love what you're doing and how you go about doing it. I've been following your channel for 3 years. There's a scene in Fight Club where Tyler asks the narrator, if you could fight anyone famous, who would you fight? He says, William Shatner. For me, it would be Fat Money Taker. It wouldn't be much of a fight, man. I heard firsthand that actually the woman in that show beat the shit out of him in a car, in a bit of an altercation. Anyway, it's none of my business to gossip about, even though I said that. Whatever, moving along. In the last 5 years, I've had a number of unexplained vocalization experiences at my cabin in the woods that is in Jasper County, Texas. I've had a sighting as well 5 years ago in neighboring Newton County, Texas. However, this occurrence happened a week ago, the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. That evening, we arrived at the cabin at 4 p.m. I had the older 3 kids with me, ages 7, 10, and 14. Our property is 66 acres of East Texas woods. That includes 2 creeks feeding into the 8-acre spring-fed pond. My closest neighbor is a half a mile north of me, and my land is surrounded by acres and acres of paper company land. The property is comprised of loblolly pine, longleaf pine, magnolia, oaks, yupon, and other hardwood. The cabin faces the pond, and behind it is the 70-yard drive from the sort of improved county road. In years past, I've had a triangular knocking incident, an incredibly loud scream that lasted over a minute, and something banging on the house, particularly when my kids are around. That is not cool. That bugs the shit out of me. I also had a tree pushed over while sitting on the porch less than 20 feet to the side and parallel to the house. However, nothing has happened in the last year that's worth mentioning. I made a call to my sister, who lives in Washington, D.C., and I have a habit of walking around when I talk on the phone. I walked out the back door, walked around the driveway, circled back around to the trailhead that leads to the back portion of the hill that the house sits on. Engaged in conversation and not having experienced anything abnormal in a long time, I let my guard down and didn't realize how far back from the cabin I'd walked. Normally, being a former Marine combined with a cautious demeanor about nighttime out there, I carry a .45 almost always. I'm not sure that matters now that I have laid eyes on one and witnessed its terrifying speed. I say terrifying speed because, number one, their ability to close width on you, and number two, it's a hell of a lot harder to hit something running in sub 4-second 40-yard dash. No shit. So as I mentioned, not paying attention, I didn't notice the woods had gone silent. It was warm for November, and the few crickets and tree frogs were still sounding off at the beginning of the call. When to my left, I heard 3 or 4 loud steps in the leaves. I immediately thought one of the kids had come out to check on my whereabouts. This didn't add up because 90 times out of 100, they'd call out first rather than walking up on me in the dark. Then a second later, while still processing what I heard, a whooshing sound, whooshing noise could be heard coming my way. It was a pine log, about 5 inches around and 48 inches long. The projectile landed 3 feet in front of me. It was thrown because of the trajectory from the left to right and because limbs falling from the trees don't helicopter twirl side to side. I yelled out in fear, "What the F?" I dropped my hand from my ear and moved like I did 35 years ago. My hair was sticking out of my neck and arms. I haven't had that kind of adrenaline rush in some time. I could hear my sister's voice loudly exclamating questions, and I yelled, "Hold on, I'm getting the F out of here." I know what it was. Now with senses back in the on switch position, I could feel it, watching me just in the shadows, out of the reach back entry lights. I didn't immediately run inside because I wanted to show it. Yeah, you caught my off guard with my lapse in discipline, but this is my home and I'll stand right here. Of course, not shitting my pants was a major victory that night, and it probably sensed my false bravado. It was a dad move, and I wanted it at least known. Sorry. I gotta get out of here. Hold on a minute, you guys. No knocking this camera over, you two. Beat it. Get out. Little shits. Sarah comes home. She's like, "Did you let the goats out?" And I'm like, "No." She goes, "Why not?" I go, "Because when I'm busy, I let the goats out, and then I'm a goat babysitter, and they don't leave me alone." And sure enough, here they are. Sorry about the interruption. Gets my attention off. I don't read smoothly, so let me do that last paragraph again. I didn't immediately run inside because I wanted to show it. Yeah, you caught me off guard with my lapse in discipline, but this is my home and I'll stand right here. Of course, not shitting my pants was a major victory that night, and it probably sensed my false bravado. It was a dad move. I wanted it to at least know I'm here to protect my kids, and I will do that until my heart stops beating. Steve, keep doing what you do, and I'm envious of the land you get to live in, particularly when it's August in southeast Texas at 101 degrees with 99% humidity. Sincerely, Tom C. in the Pinewood. Okay, man, thanks for that. And I think you mentioned you've seen one. If you got some more, if you got more you want to share here, send it away, okay, man? We want to hear all about it, all right? And I was in southern Texas in April, I think. It was April, turkey hunting. I think we were going to turkey hunting. We were shooting hogs and stuff with jackrabbits. These friends took me to show me their hunting lease near Uvalde, Texas, and I could not believe how hot it was. Oh my God. I thought I was going to die. Then that gritty, fine, red soil, sand, it gets in every one of your pores. Snake-proof boots on. It's so hot for a Canadian. Tell you what. I can only imagine. But I've had a lot of fun there. I've been in the wintertime shooting hogs from helicopter, and there's actually snow on the ground. in Texas. We road tripped, a bunch of us road tripped from Alabama all the way across to there to go do that. It's quite bearable. I love the state of Texas myself, actually. Babbling again. Let's get on with some more. Don't forget to share more, all right, man? If you got more you want to get out and share it over here, please do it, all right? Good for you standing up and standing your ground. Sometimes you got to do that, especially parents. Encounters 2.0 abridged. Abridged. A-B-R-I-D-G-E-D. Hi, Steve. First off, thank you for what you do. I respect this endeavor very much. I've read once, but figured it was too long or not believed as it was not read, and it's been a few months now. Just got missed, man. You got to understand. You have to realize by now, I don't pre-read them. Very rarely, okay? Unless I'm already familiar with the person. We've had somewhat of a communication relationship going on there, but it just didn't get read yet. All my life I've had encounters with various beings from toddler age until recently. These videos have helped me fill in some memory blanks, and the constant information keeps me putting the pieces together of my own puzzles. Perfect. I don't care if you say my name or not, or locations. Corey, Merrill, Dennemara, Morrisonville, Katyville, Pittsburgh, hometown, Sciota, Vermontville, Paradox Lake, Utica, and Nyack, to the Tappan Zee Bridge, all in New York State. I talked to my mother and she remembers the red light with blue center coming out of the woods canopy in Morrisonville and following us towards our house at the time. She remembers it leaving, I do not. We lost 45 minutes of time. What the hell? When living in the woods in Vermontville, for 3 months, there might be a couple spellos here, I had many encounters at a distance, being followed around, thought I was being hunted by them. Now I doubt it. I've come to believe these particular beings were keeping me safe. No clue why. They kept to the edges of my lights during the night. I strapped them on me in all directions if I had to do anything out of the camp yard because you could hear, no shit, hundreds of feral or wild dogs, coy dogs, and coyotes nightly, while occasionally at the very edge of the light. I could see branches moving when they should not be, no wind or anything. I felt hunted intensely. Every now and then, you could hear much more active ongoings, still not in sight. Another night I was grabbing firewood. A moose snorted, but I couldn't see it. That's when I heard a loud cracking sound, and the moose started, basically screaming, coupled with loud, wet, packing, and smashing sounds. I never went to see what happened, not ever. Hell no. I can only assume a tree was broken in and used as a moose club. It was horrifying. That was the night I abandoned my AR for wild dogs and grabbed my .375 H&H, for it was the biggest gun I had and I could use it effectively. It's a pretty big gun. While I never needed it or any gun for them, I was glad to have it for JIC. This was the same cabin that was opened up like it was a dollhouse several years prior. My dad said it was a bear, but I saw the damage. It is also the area I was wandering around on the trails and everything turned blue, unnaturally quiet. And when everything returned to normal, I guess 15 minutes later, I was 15 to 20 feet-ish from a white-tailed doe and 2 fawns. They didn't know I was there until I stepped on a stick and they pooped. Mom and deer jumped in the air and they ran away. It's also where I occasionally would find stuff move with no explanation except they either like pranks or I don't know what. I was alone, repairing the stovepipe supports. I went to the front of the camp, got a drink, went back around, and my hammer was gone. I found it about 2 miles away in my old tree stand. Okay, that's kind of creepy. Nobody was there to take it. I have to say, despite anyone's doubts, I think ravens and jays may have a connection. I don't know. And I'm not saying they see through their eyes or anything, but one huge raven was always around when activity would happen. Be it in the camp yard or anywhere else in the area. I was sure to hear the awk, awk, and floof, floof of a 5-pound bird flying in a canopy just before it came into view. Like a greeting almost. Hey, just while you're on, I'll break for 1 second. On that topic, you guys, ravens and predators in the wild go hand in hand. I always tell people when they ask me tips on how to hunt, is like especially backpackers who are in the remote mountains of British Columbia, wherever there may be grizzly bears. Ravens and grizzlies, ravens and wolf packs go hand in hand. They feed off each other. The sound of ravens attracts predators, and predators feed ravens. I've been on a kill years ago, waiting on a buried kill before it became illegal for grizzly bears, and I remember sitting there, it's getting darker, and all of a sudden this raven came flying over my back and my shoulder, right down straight in line with where this grizzly kill we thought it was, and then it swooped up off to the left, and then it just started cawing, caw, 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 caw. And I'm like, that grizzly's right underneath that raven, it's gonna come from the left. And then sure enough, about 10 minutes later, here comes this massive grizzly bear. So that raven was actually going over, finding the sleeping grizzly bear and trying to wake him up, saying, come on, uncover that moose so I can have a snack before I go to bed. Anyways, I thought I'd drop that little tidbit on to all of you about ravens and predators, right? So, who knows if there's a connection for the potential of a food treat with these beings and ravens? You never know. Probably. Because we're trying to keep to the meat of it, I'm leaving a lot out. Better chance of it being shared that way. It gets shared no matter what. The main two things that are on my mind are what I call the raccoon thing. My ex and I were driving around and this thing bolted out a left side ditch and was running across the road with everything it had. We stopped, and as it got right in front of us, it stood up on its hind legs, still sprinting as fast as it could go. It was very weird looking. I don't know if it was tan or if it was refracting the amber streetlight color. It looked blurry. Excuse me. Outline was like TV static, but made out of whatever it was in front of it. It ran into the ditch on the right near a horse farm. Apologies for the loss of your favorite close horse friend. It looked at us after it was in the dark and shadows, but its eyes were typo BER colored, and I could see them despite the blackness of it, so I don't know, that was a typo. But its eyes were BER colored, and I could see them despite the blackness it was in at that point. Maybe blue. I bet that was supposed to be blue colored. It ran off into the pasture, and my exes and I went on our way feeling like we just encountered a demon. After much searching, I could only find a wood carving from the 1400s depicting Pandora and her box and beings surrounding them. This looked like one of those things standing around them. Bushy tail, almost a porcupine-like quilled back, cat-like triangular ears, and the face of a person melded with raccoon or similar shaped face. That is definitely not your average description we get here. The details beyond that are not really something I can share with words. It was blurry to the naked eye, like so many cryptid photos are. A few years later, same ex and myself are driving around, and again, from left to right, this deer-like thing is crossing the road. I thought at first it was a deer with a broken neck because its head was only a few inches above the ground. What the F is that? We asked each other. By then, we had stopped, and as it slowly walked across the road, I could see its head was facing forward, jaw parallel to the ground, head swaying side to side slightly with each step. This was and still is a process to actually describe and understand what was seen. It had a bare skull, or bone plate, around its eyes and the top of the snout. It looked like a purplish gray tendrils or tentacles, or I don't know what it could be, coming from the front of its base, nose/mouth area. Last time I checked, we don't have octopus or squid in the northern New York woods, so no effing idea what that was about. It did seem to have antlers. The color of it was a nauseating gray colored fur on super mangy looking irritated pinkish skin. Its front legs were arms. I couldn't see the feet well, but I know an arm when I see one. The structure of the body was like an orangutan. Massive forelimbs, small back limbs, a barrel chest, muscular, but with an extremely wiry build. Downward slope back ending in some bare tail that reminds me of a long rat's tail. I can't remember the eyes of it, and every time I try, I wake up with lucid dreams of green and red striped eyes with red iris and pupils, and a huge toothy grin on a black background. Every time I try to remember, even this may be enough to induce that reaction. The size of it recently hit me recently. I credit your channel. Hold on a minute, we got a horse stampede, chicken stampede, and everything stampede. Sorry. All right, everything's cool. The size of it recently hit me recently. I credit your channel for this and other details of stuff I haven't even touched on. I never was able to see it all at once, despite it being like 50 feet away in the car's headlights. I remember the head and the neck and the chest and the arms, then ribs and stomach area, and finally hindquarters and tail. I put a measurement on it, but that's effing huge. I don't remember any sounds beyond us asking each other what the F is that. I haven't seen anything like it before or since that time, or the raccoon thing either for that matter. I no longer think I saw the ones we do not call by name starting with W, as I first did since my first attempt at writing it. By coincidence, I have stumbled upon something called a Jotun, J-O-T-U-N-N, an ancient Norse demigod legend that so far is the closest match, though I don't think it was a person's arms and legs making the tendrils and antlers, especially with the color. But honestly, this was so much of a shock already that if it was human limbs, they may not have registered as such. I have a lot of theories about encounters like this and the Sabe, etc., and I'm finding that many are being proven plausible to actual as time goes on. I will share that in a new email if you care to read it. Piezoelectric current, power vortexes, harmonics, and ELF play roles, as do various light wavelengths. I have a theory of what Dull's Sabe/Bigfoot senses near waterways too. The concentrations of rare and heavy elements in the ground are usually far above what you find elsewhere. Gold, platinum, group metals, silver, copper, lead, tin, iron, ores, gemstones, uranium ore, and rare earth elements are just a small fraction of what can be found in high concentrations in and around water. Thank you for doing what you do, Steve. Thank you to everyone else who has decided to share those who will decide to share in the future too. This is great work, and you are good people for doing what you do. Don't take guff from those swine who are the naysayers. They are weak, cannot handle reality being something they have zero control over. Sadly, I am sure more than that one cop's wife has to wear extra makeup a few days a week. The people who attack others for saying something they don't like tend to abuse their families regularly because they're weak human garbage with greed for power. Be well, everyone. All right, gotcha. This is around that time I had that cop. Remember I made mention about to introduce myself to police officer, like we normally introduce each other no matter what, who you are. And then that cop from the States emailed me with the most vicious, nasty, demeaning, insulting attack ever. I couldn't believe it. So it actually compelled me to share that email with all of you. And it turns out later on, she emailed me back and it was actually a woman. Crazy, eh? Feel sorry for that soul. She has a crack at being a super awesome, good, kind, helpful soul. Not a dark one. She chose the dark choice. Weird, huh? But anyway, that's quite the email. I can't add anything to it, or I haven't heard any descriptions like that in my life. Okay? That's one hell of a description. And if anybody else has anything similar, sounds familiar, well, hit that one up in the comment section below or let her rip, all right? Now, this title from Kevin. Can you tell me when you're going to air this so I can watch this on YouTube? Thanks. I'm going to air it on YouTube now. Hi, my name is Kevin. When I was about 13 years old, I lived on a farm, and there was 9 of us kids. We grew corn and hay on this 300-acre farm. This property had a couple of lakes on it also, with bass and catfish in them. So this happened in 1978 in June at nighttime. No punctuation at all, you guys, all right? I'll try to do my best. We didn't have cell phones or a PlayStation. We only could watch TV for half an hour a day, and we only got 3 channels to watch. So I always wanted to go camp out way back in the woods on this farm. So I told my older brother, Jim, to meet me back there to pick me up with his buddy so I could get some beer or Booms farm wine in town. So I went back to where I was camping out. I started my bonfire up with some diesel fuel. It was about 10 at night. It was dark. And this time I was standing by the fire after about 10 minutes. The fire was really doing good. Then some smaller rocks were being thrown around and by me. I thought it was my brother Jim and his buddy was playing tricks on me, but I didn't see his buddy's truck anywhere near the trail or a laneway to get back there to where I was. And this rock throwing went on for a while. I kept yelling back at what I thought was my brother throwing rocks at me, so I got pissed off and ran to where the rock were being thrown from, which was from the cornfield that was by the wood lines. I was camping yet. When I got into the cornfield while I was running, I seen the corn stalks moving around, and I'm a fast runner. I could not catch them. There was 2 of them running through the corn. This went on for at least 10 minutes of me chasing them around, and I did see footprint in the dirt in the cornfield. They were probably 11 inches barefoot prints, which I thought was odd at the time, but I just thought my brother and his friends were trying to scare me. So I went back to the fire, waited, and here comes a truck, headlights down the trail to where I was at, and it was my brother and his buddy. I told him this is a nice trick he played on me. He said he and his buddy was in town, and I just came back to pick me up to buy me some beer. The only thing I can think of, the mother of Bigfoot was letting me play with her kids. I never felt scared or fear or I was in danger, but boy did I get a good run in that night, chasing them little Bigfoots through that cornfield. I still laugh about it today. When I think about this, and let me tell you, they are fast. I have more encounters to tell you in the next email. Thanks for sharing my story. You can share my name as Kevin. I live in Lower Michigan, and thanks for sharing. Kevin, I appreciate you sending that in, man. And if you do email me back, next time try to throw a few periods and commas in there, all right? It'll be way easier to read. There wasn't one in there. I think I did pretty good at that one. That was quite the experience. And the speed, mention again, the speed, right? The speed. Always freaks everybody out. 3 encounters from Iowa. Greetings, Steve, longtime listener from Iowa. I have 3 encounter stories I want to share with you and everyone. My first was when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I used to play under the old bridge near our house, Davenport, IA, along some railroad tracks. I love going down there collecting rose quartz and sometimes Indian arrowheads, but felt completely at home just being in the woods. The tracks were heavily wooded on both sides, and there was a very large apple orchard that butted up into the wood line. It was a great place to grow up. One day while looking for quartz, I saw what looked like a big ground nest. So I decided to go investigate as it looked odd and out of place. I'd never seen it there before. It was located in the woods on the south side of the tract, which was fairly terraced. The wood line on the opposite side of the tracks was flat ground. Once I was within about 5 feet of it, I had to crawl on my stomach to get into the nest as there was a lot of undergrowth. When I finally got up to it, I remember smelling a musky, skunky odor, although it was faint or residual-like. Something had been there. I assumed it was an animal nest of some kind, but then I noticed some items lined up in a perfect row inside the nest on what looked like a dirt mound that was flattened and smoothed out, like a little table. I remember a bottle cap, a small tin can the size of 6-ounce tomato paste, a clothespin, and a few other items I can't quite recall, but it made me think it must have been a hobo that slept there and not an animal after all. What struck me was that they were lined up in a perfectly straight row with the same amount of spacing between the items. I picked up the little tomato paste can, examining it and thinking, poor hobo, he must be cold and hungry. That was my last thought in my head, and the next thing I remember, I was waking up from what seemed like a very nice nap. I realized I was under the tree canopy and remember thinking how beautiful it was, the sun streaming down on me through the treetops. Then I remembered my last recollection in the nest and shot straight up looking around. I found myself about 5 feet down from the nest, out from under the thick undergrowth, and then I noticed my clothes weren't right. My shirt was raised up and my shorts were unsnapped and unzipped. Basically, my belly was completely exposed. Naturally, I was quite alarmed, and I sat there for a moment trying to get a sense of myself. I don't feel afraid or that I'd been hurt or harmed in any way. I just sat there for a few more minutes trying to get a sense of what had happened, how I fell asleep, and who had their hands on me. I can't be certain, but I'm guessing it was about 1 or 2 in the afternoon because the sun was relatively still high in the sky. I looked all around and saw nor heard a thing until my mother's voice broke the silence by calling my name. She had actually walked up to the tree line to call me, which was very unusual, as she usually just stuck her head out the back door to call us in. Our house was the third from the track, so we could always hear her, even when we were at the furthest point of the neighboring apple orchard. I jumped up, climbed the wooded terrace to where she stood, where our alley dead-ended at the tree line. She was visibly worried and upset that I had not answered her calls, asking me what I'd been doing, etc. I told her I'd fallen asleep, and she said, maybe I need to start taking naps again during the day. I really wanted to tell my mom about what happened to me, and I almost did, as I was quite confused about what I'd just experienced. Then it dawned on me. If I told her about the nest, how I mysteriously fell asleep and woke up finding myself exposed as I did, I realized she would never let me play anywhere near the tracks or the woods again, so I never did tell her about that. Had I felt fearful, I think I would have disclosed the full experience, but I didn't. I was just very confused. I feel the need to say, in hindsight, I don't feel like I was molested in any way, but rather was the object of someone's curiosity. A couple years later, I was on the opposite side of the tracks and on the other side of the old bridge, walking through the woods, singing and daydreaming like little girls do, when I heard the sound of a branch snap, like something heavy stepped on it. I looked around, but didn't see anything, and I didn't think much about it initially, but then I heard it again. It was quite loud. I looked a little more intently. At one point, I thought someone was possibly behind that tree that was about 20 feet from where I stood. Even though I saw a black line going down the left side of the tree, I continued to stare for a time but could not confirm there was anything there at all, so I dismissed it again. I think it was probably a raccoon or a possum, as we have many of those in the woods. I went back to what I was doing, walking along, and I don't think I took more than 3 steps when suddenly an overwhelming fear hit me like a bomb. I was trying to rationalize why I was feeling afraid all of a sudden, as I knew those woods like the back of my hand. It was in the middle of the afternoon. I was trying to dismiss it entirely, but then I heard a voice in my head that literally said, "Get out of here, you're in danger." At that point, I high-stepped it out of there, crossed the tracks and climbed up the other side, looking over my shoulder as I climbed. I felt sure I was going to be grabbed at any minute while I was climbing up the terrace side of the wood line and out from underneath the bridge. I reflected on what had happened to me before, and again, thought it was probably a hobo or someone who may have wanted to do me harm. But that was the end of that encounter. I did not go back into those woods for a time. Flash forward another couple of years, I was probably 12 or 13, and a bunch of us teenagers were building a wood fort with my dad's help in the exact same location I just shared. Uh-oh. It was Saturday afternoon, late summer, and we were just finishing up after a full day's work. We had a short crew that day. There were about 6 of us, kids and my dad. My father is quite the craftsman, an upholsterer by trade, and with his help, we had one very awesome fort that we were all very proud of and eager to finish so we could enjoy the space. We were close to finishing the project on this particular day. My dad decided to call it a day, not long before dusk, around 3:30 or 4 p.m. He asked us to grab up all the tools, and he thought we may have some rain later in the evening, and he didn't want them to rust, so we grabbed all our tools and lugged them up and out from underneath the bridge. Once we reached the top, we were all just standing there a minute, resting, before heading to Dad's shop behind our house to put all the tools away. No sooner we reached the top, our next door neighbor walked over and started talking to Dad about our project. They had only exchanged a few words when all of a sudden there was a horrendous scream / screech / roar that filled the air, reverberating far and wide. I remember all the birds simultaneously rising up everywhere in response from out of that wood line as they generally roosted in the evening. The scream stunned us. Everyone was silent for what seemed like many minutes, although I'm sure it was only seconds. The scream sounded like it was about 150 to 200 yards or so down the track line, I'm guessing. I do not know what it was at the time, neither did my dad or the neighbor man or anyone else, but it seemed full of anger and anguish at the same time, very emotionally charged. I was the first one to break the silence, asking my dad what it was. He did not respond for a time, and I could practically see the wheels turning in his head, accessing every file in his brain. I said it sounded like a bulk monster or something. We had seen the film earlier that year, or possibly the year prior, but we live in Davenport, Iowa, so how can that be? We all headed over to put the tools away, and my dad told us we would need to take a break for a few weeks on finalizing the fort until he could research the cause of the scream, as it was very disturbing. He insisted we stay out of the woods and away from the fort for the time being, to our chagrin. But we obliged, and as far as I can recall, nothing conclusive resulted. Knowing my father, I believe he probably rounded up a group of men and went looking for whatever was responsible. When I asked him about it a few weeks later, he said he never determined what it could have been, but said he thought it was okay to go to the fort in the woods, but only during the day. In hindsight, I think the Sasquatch was nesting down there, and when it realized we were building a fort in the middle of its living room, it was not happy. Also, knowing what I do now, I realized I must have been hit with infrasound on the first two occasions, because it's the only thing that makes sense of what happened to me. I definitely now know that it was a quintessential Sasquatch scream, no doubt about it. These incidents have remained a mystery to me all my life. I'm now 60, and I've been obsessed with all things Sasquatch ever since. I was quite young, although I did not have any frame of reference to Bigfoot or Sasquatch at the time of my first two encounters. It seems as though this quest to understand my experiences have been driven by both my conscious and my subconscious mind. As a result, I'm thinking of going to a hypnotist to see if I can access any subconscious information that may shed some light into what I experienced when I was asleep. I think that'd be a great idea. It was not until I heard the episode with Brenda Harris on Sasquatch Chronicles talking about infrasound that literally bells went off in my head. At least it makes sense of how I was knocked out without being touched during my first encounter, and how I was hit with a fear bomb during my second encounter. I have a theory. When people see them swaying back and forth, that is when they're generating infrasound. Looking back, I'm glad I did not actually see it, because I know I would have been very traumatized. And as a child, oddly, I had always had a fear of hairy monsters of any kind. In closing, I want to let you know I live about 15 miles due south of the fellow from Eldridge, Iowa, who shared his encounter of being stalked by Sasquatch during his paper route as a young boy, as reported to the BFRO. I also know a retired teacher about 50 miles just north of Eldridge that also had a visual encounter with a 9-foot creature under a railroad bridge when she was about 8 years old. They sure seem to travel the rails. The more I learned about these creatures, the more I realized how little we actually know about what is living among us, but of which I have no doubt. Thanks for letting me share my experiences. It feels good. Love your podcast. Thanks for all you do. It's been a blessing. Quote, security is mostly a superstition. It does not exist in nature, nor do the children of men as a whole experience it. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing. To keep our faces toward change and behave like free spirits in the presence of fate is strength undefeatable. Helen Keller. There's a quote. That's a good one. Did you say to use your name? No, you didn't say not to use it, so I'm using it. Caroline Vernon, appreciate you. Thanks for sending that email in. And sounds like you're right in the thick of it with all those other accompanying episodes going on all around the same area, right? It's kind of like where I am right now. Actually, it's kind of like where I've been all my life. Everywhere I've lived, everywhere I've gone to work in the bush, there's always a dead bullseye for these experiences, right? Here in British Columbia. But I think that should probably be it for right now. I got some things to do as usual. And I gotta catch up on some sleep. Maybe I'm not gonna go fish tomorrow. I gotta catch up on it. I'm not smooth, I'm not quick, I'm feeling tired, beat. I got to, anyway, that's it for today. I'm beat, I'm tired. Thanks again for sending that in. Make sure you send more, all right? You hear of more, you hear information is gonna help anybody, make sure you send it here, and I'll share with everyone, all right? Word for word. And I'm gonna make tracks out of here. Hopefully I'm gonna go to bed early. I fall asleep quick. I'll try to sleep in tomorrow, and I'll do some more shares tomorrow, and then I think I might get my stuff ready to go in the woods and go gobble up a big slice of soul food for a day, maybe even 2. Anyway, be safe out there. You got anything else? Anybody out there you're thinking about sending any experience or knowledge? Just do it. Send it to sharemystory@howtohunt.com. I'll get to it. I'll get it shared. All right. I'll be back shortly.